Welcome to the Bros of Gardening. I'm Mike Westphal, your host, with my co-host Daniel Van Dyke. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, bud. How have you been?
Doing all right. And we're also joined by Alex, who is going to help guide us through this conversation. Today we're going to talk about watering, but this is going to be our last podcast for this season. What that season might be, we'll see. We'll see if we pick back up in the summer or fall or something like that. But we're going to talk about watering because summer's coming up, and y'all doing all right? Everybody hanging in there?
Yeah, ready for Memorial Day this weekend. And as you can tell, as everybody can tell, the heat is definitely coming. And so that's why there's no better time to talk about watering. So I think we're excited to get into the summer months as well. Spring's been great. Spring's not over yet, but we're going to hang on to it as long as we can. But the heat is coming, and so it's never been more important to get your plants watered for sure.
Yeah. June's a great time, really, still to kind of do some gardening. So while you won't have us kind of guiding you through the June months, it's still a great time. I mean, that's really when we focus on like pollinator gardens and discussions for future podcasts for sure. But it's a great time to, still focus on your garden. It's a great time to kind of see where the issues might be and start doing a little bit of fall planting. Fall is, of course, the best time to plant.
Absolutely.
It might not be the best selection is what I typically tell people, but it's still a great time to kind of look at your yard and enjoy the fruits of your labor. Like you've said so many times, I mean, whether you've done vegetable gardening or you had some landscaping done, it's time to get outside and enjoy that. And hopefully you can enjoy it with some family and friends this weekend for Memorial Day.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right. Shall we get started?
Let's do it.
All right. So how do you know when your plants actually need water? I feel like this is a really common question.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And it's hard to kind of say. It's hard to, because every plant's kind of different.
Yep.
Yeah.
Some plants, I love the plants that tell you.
Yeah.
They'll hang a little bit. But typically what I'll tell people is if it's a tree or shrub or even a perennial that's established, that's made it through a summer, one summer or a full year really, then you really shouldn't have to worry about it too much. It should be kind of on its own from there on out. So what I'll typically tell people is if you're planting, that plant's going to need to be watered.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I usually start with. I think most people are going to say, how do you know when plants need to be watered? Well, there's a couple different ideas that you can use, but my favorite is, you got the best tool in your hand, which is your finger. Just check the soil. If the top 2 to 3 inches are dry, it's time to water.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, kind of along those same lines, what I always just tell people is pay attention. Like you alluded to, there are plenty of plants like hydrangeas and stuff like that where if they start to dry out, they're going to let you know. Their leaves are going to hang, even viburnums and some different things like that, some of those bigger leaves. But then you have some of the glossy, tighter leaves like boxwoods where you're not going to have any idea it's dry without checking the soil. So whenever we have customers that do, especially with some of these large scale plantings, I always just tell them to pay attention to Mother Nature. I mean, that's the big thing for us is, like Mike said, the best thing is to get out there and feel the soil, and really just paying attention to it that way. But, keep track of water, getting on a watering regimen that you try to stick to. That's going to be the best thing for you because it can be quite, when you have a larger landscape, if you are watering it yourself, it can be quite the chore to get out and water, but it is the most important thing. And, we always tell people we set the plants up, we, till the soil, everything we've talked about for many, many weeks now. But then the last step that's really on the homeowner is making sure that it gets sufficient water. So just paying attention to Mother Nature. Hopefully Mother Nature helps you out a little bit and gives you some natural rainfall. But when it doesn't, just being on that regimen, and when it's not supplemented with rainfall, then making sure you stick to that watering regimen is kind of how we always kind of coach people up and try to instruct people to do it as much as you can. And then one thing that we've used too is that some people, we don't personally use them as much, but we have some customers who use those moisture meters, which is something that'll just go in and kind of just tell you how, what the moisture level of the soil is, and that can be beneficial as well too. But again, I think the easiest thing to do is just reach down and feel the soil, like Mike said.
Yeah, and I think it's, most people, I think it's important to kind of talk about that schedule, that, what you need to get on, especially when you first plant something or just have a landscape installed. So it's water. I typically tell people water deep, less often, which is kind of hard to understand. I'll put it this way. It's really easy to water something in a container because the container holds the water close to the root ball. You can water it. It's got a lip on the edge, so it keeps it right there, and then it drains through the holes, and you know that it's got adequate water, and it's pretty easy to do. Now, you got to water containers a whole lot more. We'll talk about that for sure. But in the ground, it's hard to, you can't see. You can't see where the water is. You can't see if it's getting down. So you want to water deep, which means typically what I'll tell people is put a hose on it, don't turn it on full blast. Just put it on kind of halfway, not a small trickle either where it's just barely dripping out. And then leave it on there for a shrub, like a 3-gallon. You might do 5-10 minutes on that shrub, or a tree that's in a 10 or a 15-gallon. You might leave it on for 20 or 30 minutes. That's a deep watering. And if you do that, then you should only have to water every 2 to 3 days. And that's only for the first 2 to 3 weeks. So that's typically what I tell people is water every 2 to 3 days for the first 2 to 3 weeks. Deep, less often. Because if you think about a root system, you got to make it kind of find water. Yeah. So if you go up to it and you give it a little bit of water, and you just kind of hold the hose there for a minute and then move on to the next one, and then you do it every day, then that plant gets used to it. It says, well, why would I go find water myself if I'm getting a little bit every day? And then all of a sudden you go on vacation, the plant struggles or maybe dies because it's so used to getting that water. So water deep less often, force the root system to search for water. And that's how you really develop a nice deep root system pretty quickly.
Yeah, that was actually one of the first things that Mike actually taught me about watering when I was getting into, more of the management side of landscape, because obviously we guarantee everything we plant, and that was one of the biggest things we struggled with, stuff that was dying that we equated to people not watering enough. But then come to find out, I think it was we were encouraging them to water, telling them how important watering was, maybe without the proper instruction of how to do it, and they were watering so frequently that, like Mike said, they weren't stretching their roots out. Their roots weren't going looking for water. Yeah. All the water was right there on the surface every single day. And then when we tell them, okay, after a couple weeks, a month, you can start to scale that back. Well, really, those plants hadn't really established or gotten acclimated at all. And so you want them to struggle a little bit. Like I said, with those hydrangeas, just because they start to wilt, that's not a bad thing. That's your sign to give them some water. But again, letting them struggle through it a little bit, they'll be tougher, and for the long run, it's going to help you out from that watering standpoint for sure. Yeah,
and wilting leaves is a great sign. Yeah. I think you mentioned like the glossier leaves. Like I think hollies are one of the hardest ones.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, some of your soft leaf hollies, like soft touch holly, Bennett's or compacta holly. Mm-hmm. Some of the Japanese hollies are really difficult to tell. They look like boxwoods, but the leaves all of a sudden just go brown if they haven't been watered enough.
And they turn quick.
And it can turn quick, and you might have lost it. Now, if you give it enough water, sometimes it'll kick off those bad leaves and put out new leaves. But then there are some plants that will wilt when they have too much water, which is a strange one too. So you kind of have to watch out. The ones that I think most typical people would grow would be like a rhododendron, not an azalea, a true rhododendron. They'll wilt if they're too wet. And Daphne will as well. So those are a couple that examples of sometimes, it's wilting, I need to go water it more, and then actually you water it even more, and then it's got too much water. Yep. So that's why the best tool is right there on your hand. Use your finger. If the soil is moist, then don't water. You don't need to.
Yeah. So let's see. What else do I have next? Oh, yeah. What are the pros and cons of drip irrigation versus sprinklers? I feel like I see less sprinklers nowadays.
Yeah, I know you all do a lot of irrigation type of stuff.
Yeah, so we deal with it a lot. We deal with a lot of irrigation companies, and obviously with the line of work that we, with the type of landscaping we do, we're focusing more on installing beds and plant material. We don't as much focus on the grass side of things. We'll do some sod and stuff like that, but really the only irrigation I truly recommend to properly water beds is the drip irrigation. Yeah. And so drip irrigation is really designed for planting beds. And like Mike was talking about earlier, what it's designed to do is you essentially have these little emitters on each plant. And sometimes if it's a 15-gallon, you might have 2. Like if it's a tree, you might have 2 emitters. And what it does is it just will drip water constantly right on top of the root ball to concentrate the water on what that plant needs, and it'll try to get a deep watering. You can water longer, but it's a very efficient way to water.
It is.
The sprinkler heads, especially like the rotary heads that are really designed for lawn, which they're great for the lawn, which Mike can talk about as much as anybody, but for planting beds, you're basically watering the ground. It's intended to only water a couple inches in the ground, which is what we just talked about you don't want to do. You want to get that deep watering. And so that's why I always tell people, I'm not saying sprinkler systems are bad if you have rotary heads or spray heads in your beds already. I'm not saying that it's going to have an adverse effect, but you got to supplement it with some deep hand watering as well. And that's always kind of that catch-22, because people see the water every day. They see the irrigation system running, but it's only watering an inch or two, 2-3 inches in the ground at most, when those root balls are already 8 inches in the ground, and we want to get the soil underneath the root balls moist
Exactly.
and wet, so that it really goes looking for water like we were talking about. So drip irrigation, if you are planning and installing a new irrigation system for your planting beds, definitely recommend the drip irrigation versus the spray heads. They do have spray heads that are designed for beds, but again, you're watering a lot of the unnecessary area. It can be rather wasteful, and a lot of times you're watering the weeds.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to concentrate the water on the actual plants and the root balls that you planted, as opposed to if you have some weeds popping up and all of a sudden you're watering the entire bed. Well, those weeds are going to love it, and they're going to grow faster than your plant material and all that, and it can kind of encourage some weeds and stuff like that too. So not a big fan of the rotary heads when it comes to sprinklers and stuff like that, but the drip irrigation is definitely an effective way to water.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest difference. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's drip irrigation is for your flower beds and your gardens and your landscaped areas, and then the sprinklers are for the lawn. Yeah. Sprinklers are designed for lawn, like you said. It only gets the top 2 to 3 inches, and we want a deep watering. So I think that's a great one. Soaker hoses work as well. I think soaker hoses are a little bit more of a temporary solution, which is like, hey, I want to get this row of plants established. Like I just planted a hedgerow, so I'll go and wrap a soaker hose all the way down the line just so I can make it watering easier. I will say drip irrigation or soaker hose, you got to run it for a long time.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's usually like 2 to 3 hours. But most of the times you can put it on a timer. It's pretty easy to do, and you don't have to stand there and look at it the whole time. But yeah, that's the biggest differences. And what I'll also say is sprinklers shoot over the top. And what do we talk about when we talk about watering plants is don't water the leaves, water the root system. Yeah. And so now you got wet leaves, and dampness and darkness cause fungus. So that's what I always talk about is water in the morning as much as you possibly can, and try not to water the leaves of your plants. I mean, how many times have I had a hydrangea leaf, come walking into the store with black spots all over it? It's because, and the first question I always ask them is, do you have a sprinkler system? And it's almost always, or they're, watering over the top.
Right.
Yeah.
Very, very few plants actually take water in through the leaves. I mean, some do, but they really expel air and water through their leaves, and they're taking in the moisture from the root system. So that's where to put the water.
And then one other quick thing about the drip irrigation that I always just like to warn people about. A lot of times it's that thin, probably half-inch pipe, and they have like some spaghetti strings coming off of it is what we call them, but it's the really, really thin 1/8-inch pipe that leads to the plants. The only downside to it is they cut like butter. If you're working in the garden and you're using a shovel, before you know you're even close to it, you're going to slice right through it. So just being conscientious, if you're somebody who likes to work in the garden, that's why I don't recommend it a lot of times for annuals and areas where you're going to be changing it out a lot or digging in that area, or just be very conscientious of it to pull those strings out of the way before you go in there and start digging or tilling or anything like that, because before you've even touched it, you're going to cut right through it. Because it runs throughout the entire garden, so it's thin. It makes it more pliable. It's cheaper that way. You don't want to run hard, PVC through your entire garden. So I understand why it's done that way. It's just we have had plenty of issues finding that when we don't mean to, and then we have to repair it, and so that can be a bit of a headache. So I always just try to forewarn people, be careful, because that stuff does cut very easily.
That's where I go back to like my planning thing, always drawing a little map of everything, so you know where everything is in your yard.
For sure.
So kind of going back a little to the first question, a little bit more detail on what are the signs, or what signs can you find when you either overwater or underwater plants?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very similar. It's the wilting of the leaves. You might see some more fungus issues for plants that are overwatered. You might see plants typically, if they're struggling. So let's say it's a plant that's surviving, but it's not getting enough water. Then it opens itself up because it's struggling to other issues like disease and insects. So insects will hunt after plants that are struggling. So if there's a fungus on the plant, an insect will come. If the plant is drying up and it's not doing as well and it's struggling, then insects are going to come. So it's kind of looking at your yard, like we've said, and kind of keeping an eye on it. The moisture meter is a great one for if you're really concerned if you're overwatering or underwatering. But most plants, you're typically looking at the leaves. If it's wilting, check the soil. If it's wet, don't water. If it's dry, need to water more. And then my advice would be just water that deep and less often. Heavier waterings less often. Those are kind of, I think, the most important things to look after. Another tip that I'll throw in at this one is mulch. Mulch keeps your soil consistent, especially in the moisture area. So it keeps your temperature consistent, but it also keeps the moisture consistent. It also makes watering a whole lot easier.
Yep, and much more effective.
If you've ever tried to water after you plant something, there's just soil there, it runs everywhere. The mulch kind of helps as like almost like a breaker. You know, I'll talk about one of my favorite tools here in a little bit, but there's a breaker that you put on the end of a hose that kind of makes the water go in a shower effect. Well, it's the same with the mulch. If you water over mulch, it kind of breaks up the water, allows it to percolate down into the soil a lot better. And it's a lot easier than, trust me, I'm doing it right now. I planted some plants. I haven't mulched yet, and it's annoying me because watering takes twice as long than if I had mulch.
Right. Yeah. Does it make a difference, like what mulch you use? Like if you decided to use?
No. I mean, like I said, you can use pretty much any mulch that you want. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of mulch, and then even like rock. We've talked about rock. I mean, we do plenty of rock gardens. Rock does the same thing. That's why rock's so effective in drainage, is it slows water down, and that's really what you're trying to do, so the water doesn't just run off the top of the root ball.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, Mike pretty much said it. I mean, the leaves and kind of the impact that underwatering or overwatering. A lot of times I've seen with overwatering, you know, you mentioned like a fungus. Well, if we have a customer that's having some plant struggle, we come out and they go, oh, well, you know, we've been watering every day. And like they're saying that as a rebuttal to watering problems. A lot of times, like, okay, well, maybe that is the problem. You'll see some fungus or some, you know, mushrooms and stuff growing around. Like sometimes it might be staying too wet. Or a lot of times, like Mike said too, damp and dark. Watering at the right time is really important too. You don't want to water late at night and then let it sit there and be wet overnight when it's dark. You know, if you can water early in the morning before that heat comes, don't want to water in the middle of the day either. So I think watering at the proper time, it can go a long way as well. And a lot of times if the leaves, you know, there's brown leaves versus like yellowing leaves. And I've kind of noticed a differentiation between when the yellowing leaves come, a lot of times that can be overwatering. When the leaves are more yellow or the leaves start to turn a little mushy, you know, that time can be overwatering. But not to go back and switch gears, but this comes back down to soil prep too, because a lot of times if you're dealing in this area, we have a lot of clay, and clay doesn't perk; it just holds water. So if you just dig a hole, pop that in, and it's sitting in clay, when you water, that water is just going to sit there, and so it's going to have wet feet. And some plants can take that, but then a lot of plants can't. And so if it has wet feet, you'll see it start to yellow, and then a lot of people go, "Oh, I'm not watering enough," and then they start to up the water. They're trying to save the plant when really they're drowning it. And so just being conscientious of that, and then where those moisture meters are, and feeling the soil for yourself, because if you don't prep the soil correctly, then a lot of times it will hold water, especially in our area when we have the clay and stuff. We have a lot of beachy areas as well, so that's great for the water, you know, as far as perking. But you know, if you do have clay prevalent in your soil, it's going to be more prone to hold water, which then if you can take the proper steps to make sure it drains, the better off your plants will be.
The yellowing leaves is a great point. I didn't think about that. But yeah, you'll see plants look a little bit like under fertilized. You might be feeding it, but if you're watering it too much or it's getting too much water, it's washing that plant food away. And therefore the plants might look a little anemic.
Good to know. Okay, now changing gears a little bit on how effective are rain barrels and rainwater harvesting systems.
Yeah, I mean, I only know about rain barrels. Daniel, I don't know if you've installed any like of the bigger harvesting systems, like underground systems that some people have looked into.
We've done some things like rain gardens and stuff. We've installed a lot of rain gardens where we will encourage, you know, an entire yard to drain towards a certain area. A lot of times this is actually dealing with wet areas. And then you can plant that garden and prep that garden appropriately to basically you're using all that water, but you're controlling it and concentrating it in one area and then putting a bunch of plants in that can take that amount of water. I mean, that's really the only thing we've done outside of rain barrels as well. Is some rain gardens. We actually just finished installing one like 2 days ago.
Oh, cool.
And it's a big one. It was just this huge property where it was also, it's on the water, and so they had some flooding issues, and so they didn't want to just push everything into the water, obviously. So we put this huge rain garden on the side of their house, graded everything towards the rain garden, planted a bunch of different things in there like Itea and some other things like that can take the wet feet, clethra. So it's you're gonna get a lot of butterflies, a lot of birds, all that fun stuff. But then it can take the wet feet. And so, we've had a couple rainstorms. We kind of found the low-lying area and said, all right, this is where we're going.
This is it.
And, you dig it out about 8 inches and then put a bunch of sandy compost mix. You till it into the native soil just so that it drains really, really well. Like I said, they lived on the water, so they already had fairly sandy soil, which helped. Right. But, yeah, I mean, other than rain barrels, that's really the only thing we do as far as trying to kind of control and encourage that water to collect somewhere.
Rain barrels are amazing. I mean, they're great. You think about how much rain hits your roof of your home. And if you've got gutters with a downspout, it's a super easy, free basically way of collecting water. And I always say there's nothing better than rainwater. I mean, tap water's got fluoride and different things in it, and especially if you're growing houseplants. So if you're growing houseplants, you should have a rain barrel because your indoor plants don't get rained on. Yeah. So it's, that's almost what exclusively I tell people that are really into houseplants, like get a rain barrel. It's the best thing that you can do for your houseplants. I mean, every once in a while I take all my houseplants outside and put them outside when I see a rain coming. But it's so much easier just to get a rain barrel. There's so many different diverters now. You can get like a diverting system where you can just plug it right into the side of your downspout. And when the rain barrel fills up, then the rain goes back down the downspout. Rain barrels will fill up real fast too. So if you really end up collecting the rainwater, you can attach rain barrel after rain barrel after rain barrel and have like 4 or 5 in a line because they'll fill up in just one good storm real quick. And there's nothing better than rainwater. So I definitely say if you want to do it, go for it. It's something easy too that a homeowner can do. Right. You don't need the rain harvesting systems, which I think are kind of like more of like your underground like big systems that are sucking moisture up, collecting it so that you can use it later. Those have to be professionally installed for sure, but a rain barrel anybody can do. You can just hook it right up and it's super, super easy, and you can make it decorative with a rain chain and all these different things. It's a lot of fun. It's easy to do and it's great for the plants.
Yeah, we've had more and more customers asking for rain barrels. Again, when we sell these jobs, when we are explaining to the customer what their responsibilities for the landscape project are going to be, we always start and finish with water. So they've got it on the brain, and so then they start to think. I mean, again, if you're running off tap water, not only is it like Mike mentioned, there's some other things in the water, but also just the expense of it. I mean, watering can get expensive. And so if you do, it sounds odd to say free water, but yeah, if you have free water and free moisture you can collect, the square footage of the house, I mean, that's basically impermeable space. And so you can control all that water and collect it and then reuse it. And we had a customer who had 2 hooked on every corner downspout. Like Mike was saying, they hooked 2 together. Oh, wow. And in a rainy season, I mean, they wouldn't have to use the spigots for months, essentially until, once you get really hot and you have to step up your watering, or again, seems like we don't get as much rain as we want in the summertime. And so, you'll still have to supplement it sometimes. But I mean, if you have a rainy season, I mean, you might not have to turn your spigot on for months at a time.
Exactly.
So, it's an easy way to do it. And then, like you said, you can get aesthetic with it too. Those rain chains are a cool way to do things. You can dress it up a little bit. So it's not, they've come a long way. They're a lot more decorative and stuff than they used to be.
Some of them even have little planters in them.
They do.
Yeah.
I think the biggest concern is probably mosquitoes because it's a big barrel of water sitting there. But you just put a mesh screen. Most of them have a mesh screen built in right over the top so the mosquitoes can't get in to lay their eggs. Right. If you've got an open top one or the mesh screen isn't working, you can put mosquito dunks in there, which mosquito dunks are just basically beneficial bacteria that just kill the larva stage of the mosquito. So you can just drop them in there. It's not going to hurt your water. Don't want to maybe drink your roof water, which why would you anyways? But for your plants, it'll be perfectly safe, and it's a great way to kind of control the mosquitoes. I think that's probably the biggest concern people ever have. I mean, maybe the pressure. So then I'd say put it up on a couple bricks or something, get it up off the ground so it's downhill.
That's a great point.
You can put a pump in it, so you can get just a fountain pump and just attach it so it sucks the water out and pumps it into the hose. But really, I just say raise it up a little bit. I actually use the watering can portion of it more than anything. So I just turn the spigot, fill up the watering can, and then use that for house plants or watering the vegetable garden or whatever it might be.
Yep.
It's pretty convenient. Okay, so what tools are the most useful to have when watering? I know you've been excited about this one.
I know one that Mike's going to go with, so I'll let him start with that, but it is definitely the most important one.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Dram watering one. I mean, it is the best tool out there. I always say if you go around a garden center and you find it on the end of every single hose, because that's all we do all day, every day is water, then it must be a good tool. And it's on every single hose here at the garden center and all of our markets everywhere. We use it, and of course at my house, because it's the best thing. It saves your back a ton. You can water hanging baskets. You can water your plants. It's got a breaker on it, which breaks the water, as I was mentioning earlier. So it doesn't just flood an area, and it makes it easy to water. And then it's got an on and off valve, which I absolutely love. So you can turn it off, conserve water when you're moving from one section to the next section. I'll use that when I said lay down the hose and put it at the base of the plant and let it water. I drop my rain wand down at the base of the plant, and then I can just turn the valve on halfway.
Yeah, you can control your water pressure.
So it's the best tool you'll ever use when it comes to watering.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's spot on. I mean, like I said, what we always encourage the guys to do is, having a good hose, a hose that doesn't leak, that you can get a good connection on. Because again, if you're trying to water, everybody knows when you turn that spigot on and the hose is spraying 3 different ways out of there. I mean, you still might have decent water pressure, but you're just losing a ton of water. You're wasting a ton of water. Again, that can get expensive. A lot of our projects, when you do have that many plants, I mean, that can be a long time watering. So if you're, leaking that badly, so having a good hose with good connections, and then a watering wand, because if you don't have a watering wand, you just have the end of a hose. If you're just dumping that water, it's going to be shooting dirt everywhere. And like Mike said, the breaker on the end of it, which there are other forms of it. I mean, you have shower heads and stuff like that on just a normal hose and spigot, but really the watering wand just makes everything so much easier. You can reach it. I mean, like me and Mike, neither one of us are short, and so if you're trying to get to the base of a plant, we don't want to water the leaves, like we said. So if you're trying to get to the base of a plant, having that 3-foot extension down, you can basically just sit it right there and you can get all the water concentrated where you want. It's much more efficient, and it's just better for the plants in general. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So we have all of our trucks are equipped with good hoses and watering wands. And that's, we always tell the guys, especially when we start to warm up, watering is the most important step you can do at the very end of a job, because especially when you put in new plants, if it doesn't get that water that it needs to really water it in, they can start to turn and get really stressed really quickly.
And Dram is an amazing company. I mean, they basically all they do is watering tools. So you'll see like the Dram Revolver, which has all the different settings, like the jet stream. And so, those are good if people are used to them. I certainly don't have a problem with it. I will say the Pistol, which is just a jet stream that you can kind of open up to more of a fan. That's for like spraying off your car or washing your driveway off or something like that. But I mean, those are kind of my favorite tools. The hose is completely right. If you're a homeowner, I mean, what I sell on the retail side and what I recommend, or what I really love right now, are those lightweight hoses. I mean, Flexzilla and 0G hoses are my favorite. They're lightweight. You'll have some issues with a couple kinks here and there. They say they never kink, but I've never run across a hose that doesn't kink from time to time. And then my best advice is coil your hose up at the end of the day, because there's nothing worse than, a hose that's all, and I guess that comes from a retail side of me seeing people water every day. And I'm like, why would you put your hose back like this? Because the next person that pulls it out has to deal with that mess. But coil up the hose, because it actually trains it. And it makes it so much easier every time when you pull it out. So it might be hard the first 2 or 3 times that you do it, but once you get the hang of it, then it's pretty easy. And then the hose has like a little bit of a memory. It kind of starts to form that way, and it works really well. I think other things would be, if you don't have an in-ground irrigation system, then for your lawn, get a good sprinkler. Dram makes an amazing a sprinkler. There's oscillating sprinklers that emulate a little bit more of the rainfall, but I like just a regular, what I think is called a turret sprinkler, which just and then comes back. I love those because you can put them at the corner of the yard and you can like direct it, whereas an oscillating sprinkler just covers a large rectangle pattern basically. So those are some of my favorite tools. You can also get a timer. I mentioned that earlier. There's simple ones. You can get digital ones too. But a timer that you can put on, a drip irrigation or onto a soaker hose, or even if you're just like, I got to run to work. I want to water this plant for 30 minutes, but I got to go. You can drop your hose on there, set the timer. It's just it literally runs off of the water. So as it kind of sets back to 0, then it turns off. So there's a lot of different tools out there for when it comes to watering. Indoors for houseplants. I mean, I used to buy for one of our departments that sells like watering cans. And watering cans, I always bought 2-gallon watering cans, the big, because I'm a gardener. But when I started getting into houseplants, somebody said you should sell the smaller watering cans, and I never really understood why. And the reason is because you don't want to be hauling a big 2-gallon watering can throughout your house. So those little small ones are like the best. There's decorative ones. I used to
with houseplants also don't want a lot of water a lot of the time. So
I used to hate misters. I think misters are great sometimes. Some plants indoors like that humidity. So I could talk about watering for probably another 2 hours if you wanted me to.
Well, I think this, unless you guys have anything else you'd like to add on watering.
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just pay attention to your plants, pay attention to Mother Nature. I mean, that's going to be really what dictates how much you need to water is how much rainfall we get. Again, thinking more especially on the outdoor plants and stuff like that, which really obviously is what the summer heat is going to impact. I think that's the big thing is just pay attention, be conscientious of it, and if you think it needs water, just double check, just go down and feel it because if it's stressed out, like Mike said, it could be a number of other things that could be causing that. It might not just be water, even if it is hot outside. You can still overwater. So let your plant struggle a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's going to be hot. It's going to be hot for a while. So you're going to have to do some watering. That's just how it works. What I always tell people is, hey, start in the early morning. As we've recommended here in this podcast is water early so that it can use that water during the heat of the day. But for your own safety, water in the sun in the morning. And then as it gets brighter and hotter, work your way into the shade. So that's what I definitely tell the staff here at the garden center is like try and water the sunny spots early, work your way into the shade because then you're in the shade when it's the hottest part of the day too. So if your plan is to water one weekend, then start in the morning out in the sun and then work your way to the shade and that way you'll be a little bit cooler when the sun hits the peak of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. All right. I think this is it.
Yeah, this is a great podcast. I love talking about water, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. I think I wrote down lawns. We gotta do a podcast on lawns because I know people are like, how do I water my lawn? Well, we'll tell you in the fall. So you gotta we'll leave on a cliffhanger.
Ooh, like that.
It's a super cliffhanger, right? How do I water my lawn? But we got lots in store for the fall, so we're excited to be back, and we thank everybody for this great season, and thank you guys.
Yeah, no, thank you both.
Great.
So thanks everybody for joining us for this podcast of the Bros of Gardening, and we'll see you next season. Thanks everybody.